Hey, what is going on, everybody? Boilon here, and welcome to what I'm going to call the Death Scourge Minion Palapalooza. So we're here to talk about what that I am officially building for the Death Scourge for Archangel, which is expected to be, I would say, in about a week and a half, no more than 2 weeks at this point. And we're going to be taking a look at the actual Death Scourge nodes. So thank you to Minball, and we do have information that was semi-leaked or whatever about the actual characters on the Death Scourge nodes. I want to talk about what they kind of look like, what I'm concerned about and not, and I kind of want to draw this back to the Scourges as well, the Death Scourges that we have that buff the minions, and why I chose the ones that I did, and why I don't think the other ones are going to be all that great. So if you're ready to go, let's boil this down. Okay, so again, thank you to Minball for the nodes leaked for nodes 1 and 2. He does have all the other ones here, but we're specifically focusing on nodes 1 and 2 for this video. So if you do want to take a look at them, you can find it out on his Discord channel, which I can provide a link in the description down below if you're interested. But let's start off. So we know that these are all minion based, right? You're going to be forced. Doesn't matter what difficulty that you're going to be doing, you're going to be forced to use minion characters. Now, I have been told, or at least I've heard, I believe according to Tana, that the minion nodes have a minus 50% damage reduction on the enemies, so that they're going to hit. They're not going to hit as hard, despite the characters that show up. That being said, it's still relevant, though, what characters are actually on the node, because that will kind of explain some of the problems and whatnot. And before we get started on this overview, I'm sure you're already looking at it right now, I do want to bring up this. So these are the Death Scourges that you're going to be able to apply for these levels, and there's 3 in particular that affect minions that I think we should all talk about. Rise anew. On turn, minions flip negative effects, so this is good. And from the perspective that you should be thinking about the enemies as we go through them, what negative effects they apply, and what positives you could get as a result of that. Undead swarms, all minions gain revive once. And then Super Soldier Serum, this is what almost everyone's probably going to be running. All minions gain 30% focus, health, crit chance, crit damage. We'll talk about these 2 in particular and why that's important. Revive health, and active healing. It cuts off a little bit. So, actually, it should be all stats. I thought it was all stats. Maybe it's not. Okay, well, yeah, I thought it was all of them, but now I'm not so sure. Anyways, the part with the revive health is interesting because, of course, if you're running undead swarms, all minions gain revive once anyway, so that's good. If they have to come back, then that should be okay. And it's on spawn, which means that it's going to happen, once on node 1 and again on node 2, assuming that they're alive by the end of the match. So that's good too. So let's jump back to the actual nodes. So node number 1, the first wave. Now, we don't know when the second waves drop and things like that, but, presumably it's after a couple of them die. Doctor Strange, Toad, Pyro, Spider-Man Noir, Sabretooth, and Blob. So what kind of synergy is out here? Well, we have Toad and Pyro and Sabretooth and Blob. Sorry, Toad and Blob, and then Pyro and Sabretooth. So there's going to be a lot of bleeds. Actually, just right then and there, you can see there's going to be a lot of bleeds. Toad could extend this, and then there's going to be some positive effect clearing with Toad starting off with his ultimate, because that's usually how it happens. Doctor Strange can flip. Spider-Man Noir, again, more bleeds there. So there's going to be a lot of bleeds. Now, if you can survive the bleed damage, then you can flip that into death proof, I'm pretty sure it is. Or you could throw in a burner team, and you could just eat all the initial attacks. That way you're not receiving all the bleeds, and then you could bring in your other characters in afterwards to deal with it. So it's not, their second turn is not going to be anywhere near as bad. Also, you'll avoid the Doctor Strange Winds of Tomb. So if you're running Ravagers, which we'll talk about, they have on-spawn buffs, and I don't really want to get those flipped. So I think that could be a plausible strategy, is just to throw in a burner team on turn 1 here with wave 1. Second wave, Lady Deathstrike, Baron Mordo, Mystique, Magneto, and Juggernaut. So at this point, you're having more Brotherhood characters. Lady Deathstrike, which pairs up with Sabretooth, but Sabretooth also pairs up with Magneto. So there's a little bit of issue here, and I think that you'll probably want to make sure that you're downing characters like Toad and Blob first, and probably Doctor Strange so he doesn't revive anyone, I think, at that stage, because you really don't want Blob spamming out those deflects, which is super irritating on any time you fight Blob. And the synergy there with the extensions, you don't want Toad to stay around too much longer. So I think that's kind of like what I'm thinking of when I'm looking at this, is that I probably want to do a burner on wave 1 and then bring my team in. So, you know, if you have veteran accounts are going to have, you know, a variety of like level 60 minion teams, probably not super high, but enough to throw in as a burner team. So for everyone else, depends on what difficulty you're running, right? If you're running a lower difficulty, this might not be too hard, and you might just be able to smash it, given with the buffs and their sort of reduction in damage as well. Now, node number 2 has a Drax, so that's on-spawn taunt, so you're going to have to get through that or remove it with a skirmisher or whatever. Green Goblin, Zombie Iron Man Hela, Longshot, and Merc Tank, which I'm assuming they mean Merc Riot Guard. So this one's a little bit interesting because you have the spawn taunt, and then you have the Merc Riot Guard taunt, and then you have the Zombie Iron Man and Hela combo. Now, keep in mind, though, outside of war, Hela does go first, not Zombie Iron Man, so I don't know what Hela's necessarily going to spread on her ult on her first turn, and Zombie Iron Man is going to go in for the ability block. All of these things will be able to flip, though, so Green Goblin will also lead to some flipping, not necessarily debuffs. So I'm trying to think of all the debuffs that are going to be on here. Mostly it's going to come early on from Zombie Iron Man, possibly from the Greg summon, which is going to put a heal block down on one of your characters. Longshot just does damage, he doesn't really do any debuffs, so there's not much here. Now on that second wave though, you have Polaris and Scream, so there's going to be some combo here with Polaris and Longshot. So you probably want to get through Hela and Zombie Iron Man where possible, because like you probably don't want that to be there. And then also Longshot afterwards, so that would be my like starting, and that's just my thoughts initially on this one. And then Scream, there's going to be a combo here, I guess, because of Spider-Verse from Green Goblin and Scream and stripping buffs. But it's not too bad. You probably do want to get rid of Scream, though, before that third wave drops, because then you're also getting Carnage, and I don't think that's a good idea. And I think it's a good idea to also get rid of Longshot, like I said early on, because then you see Shatterstar, Rhino, Carnage, and Doc Ock. The Doc Ock is not too big of a deal, I don't think, but you do want to get rid of Longshot so it doesn't just synergize with Shatterstar spamming all of his abilities on the X-Factor characters. And so overall, the nodes actually don't look too terrible. My one thing would be that Doc Ock, you know, he does heal his Sinister 6 allies, which would be Green Goblin and Rhino, but that's only on a block. And normally how you deal with that is by stunning Doc Ock, but none of the characters that I'm suggesting anyways stun, but it might not be completely necessary. With the increased damage and, you know, that they'll be getting, you know, it's highly possible I could just kill Doc Ock outright, but I'll be really interested to play this when it actually comes out. Now, when it does come out, I will be running, of course, and releasing a video on, you know, the first 2 nodes, especially. I'll get those out ASAP so that people are aware of that. Now, I want to jump back to, of course, the roster screen and talk about what I'm doing. Now, this is probably going to come to no surprise. I'm doing exactly what I said in my last like 1 or 2 videos that I talked about minions already. So I'm doing the 3 Ravagers, and I'm doing Hand Blade Master and Hand Archer. So as you can see, they're my top row. I already have them at level 70 G13. I'm on my way working up to G14. So that's where I'm going to be taking them. Level 75 G14. I don't want to go higher than this, and the reason for that is because G15 is a significant SBC crunch. It requires a lot more than other gear tiers. Gear tier 15 is a lot, and so I don't really want to commit that much gear to these characters if I don't have to. So I'm going to be taking them to 75 G14. I'm going to run, you know, whatever the highest difficulty I can at that time, and then make a judgment call about whether or not it's worth, you know, if I'm close, you know, if just a little bit more investment at that point would get me into that next difficulty. Because I think that's really what it comes down to, is how much investment do you need to put in to get to that next difficulty, or whatever difficulty that you're comfortable with. And so trying to push as much as you can if that's what you want to do for Archangel, if you care. I want to get at least a 5-star Archangel. If I can get a 5-star Archangel, I'll be quite happy with my progress, and I'd be more than happy. Nobody wants to put, you know, resources into minions, but I will say that I do have Yondu and T'Challa geared. So for that reason, putting into the Ravagers then creates a full team for me. And so that gives me another team that I can use in War Offense. And so I don't feel that bad about it. Now, why am I doing Hand Blade Master and Hand Archer? If you watch my previous video about minion stats, then you would know, and I have it up here. We're not going to talk about it in too detail, but I do want to kind of raise that outside of the Ravagers, who have some of the better stat totals, this is basically benched across all of the other minion characters. And you can see that by and large, like, the Ravagers do have a lot of green, which means that they have a lot of the top stats. If they're top 5, they get a green. If they're top 10, they get a yellow. Now, Ravager Boomer's just kind of inching out here, but overall, he's still a very powerful character, and the kit and the synergy from the Ravagers are still the best. So these are still going to be the best 3 characters, in my opinion, you know, and even better if you have good red stars on them. Now, for the hand characters, though, you can see over here on the... Oops, sorry. I screwed that up a little bit. Let's just move over a little bit for Hand Blade Master. So Hand Archer and Hand Blade Master. Hand Blade Master is number 2 in damage. He's actually just slightly behind Merc Soldier for top damage. I don't like the kit for Merc Soldier. I don't think his damage stat numbers are, his percentages in his kit are really all that special. But Blade Master actually can dish out a lot of damage, so I've actually given him a Striker ISO. His other stats are pretty good. He's got 111 in speed, which is very respectable, and his health is still pretty good as well. If you look at some of the other, and same with Hand Archer, it's not too bad here, top 8 for, you can just look at the stats, right? 38,000 damage stat, 30,000 damage stat. But if you look at some of the other characters, like any of them, really, like any of them, AIM, Kree, Hydra, Shield, they all have pretty terrible damage stats for the most part, like usually around the 20,000-ish level. So a lot of the hand characters have at least 10,000 or more damage stat over them. Even the Shield characters, you know, they're, 20,000, they just haven't been touched for so long. And because that Hand Archer and Blade Master got a base stat rework, and actually got a very subtle change in their kit, I think I'm going to do it. And I want to talk about them individually. So Hand Blade Master's passive is pretty garbage. Like, it's pretty basic. But that 20% damage is the reason why his damage stat is as high as it is. His special, or ultimate, minion ultimate, it's a 3 cooldown attack. But if you put the T4 in it, it guarantees that bonus attack. And this is actually worth 120% damage. So if you put the T4 into this, which I will do, that's going to be 430% damage. And then a guaranteed bonus attack for 380. So that's like 810% damage on a special on a cooldown of 3. It hits really hard, believe it or not. His basic, it's pretty basic. I'm not going to T4 that. It's 300% damage. So I'm going to be relying a lot on the special on a cooldown of 3. That's pretty quick. Given his speed, I think it's not going to take that long to recharge. Hand Archer, and he has a Striker ISO, by the way, because I want him to do more damage on his follow-up and when he hits with his special. Hand Archer, of course, has that Arrow Storm, so it is on a cooldown of 4, but it's a guaranteed positive effect clear across the board, and it's AoE. With the damage, I don't think I'm going to T4 this. I don't think the 60% damage is necessary unless I find that it might push me through to the extra difficulty. But this will be a good opportunity for Raider, because if there's a lot of characters, also you can get through some of those pesky taunts that we talked about in the previous nodes. So the Drax, possibly, or whoever, right? The Blobs, anyone with a taunt or positive effects, this will really help clear that. His passive is nothing really to talk about. He does get extra damage, though, with hand allies, so because I'll have one more hand character, the damage stat will be bumped up by an additional 10%, which actually isn't terrible, and he gets accuracy, which I don't think is really much of an issue. His basic, also nothing to really to talk about there. There's a little bit of extra piercing damage, so it is what it is. So yes, the hand characters are raw damage, but I think that their base stat rework has increased that enough to make them viable. Now, I wish there was a rework, and I think that the hand being the only team that really hasn't been reworked ever, I think that means down the line that they're the most likely to. Now, I don't know when that would ever happen, but I think that still a hand rework possibly could still be in the cards sometime. The Ravagers, though, of course, if you don't know the Ravagers very well, I'm not going to go into them in full detail with their kit, but all of them have on-spawn buffs, which is really important. Some of them you do need the T4, some of them you don't. So level 4 with Ravager Boomer gives you on-spawn offense up for 2 turns to self and all Ravager allies, which is really nice. He also does have an assist feature as well to non-Ravager allies. It's a bit of a low percentage there, and his special is really nice because, and I'll have to T4 this one as well, because it does reduce speed bar in a semi-AoE or adjacent target fashion. 30% is pretty good, you know, especially if it's hitting multiple targets, which I really like, and he gets an increase of speed bar for 30% as well. So the damage is pretty respectable. I'm probably going to switch him, though, to a Raider, I may keep him as Striker. I haven't really decided. And on his basic, he does apply slow, although it's more guaranteed if you get the basic attack. Now, Ravager Stitcher is going to be the healer here, and that's the reason why I'm probably going to blue 3 healer him when I get the chance, because he's where most of the healing is going to come from. On spawn, regeneration to self and all Ravager allies for 2 turns if you get the T4. I think I'm going to have to do this. I think I'm going to want this. So I don't know yet. Maybe I'll put this in after, you know, make sure I save some T4s just in case I need to do some upgrades. His Stitcher kit, very low cooldown. A lot of the minions have low cooldown abilities. It does a drain, basically. Is a life steal, and then it redistributes, also heals, and then you do it twice. So it's a fair bit of extra damage, and it's a fair bit of healing as well, which goes through heal block as well, which is really nice. And his Disintegrator Ray clears death proof and does a boatload of damage. And it's all piercing, actually, which is really interesting. Some people have run him as a striker, so I don't know. We'll have to see how difficult in practice that the nodes are. You know, maybe you could use the extra damage on Stitcher. And so just like the other minions as well, Ravager Bruiser gives defense up on turn. If you get the T4s, it's 2 turns, so I might have to do this as well. And it gives Ravager allies 25% armor. They also, so that on spawn is really important, because the alternatives to this that some people have been talking about are the Mercs, Merc Lieutenant and Merc Riot Guard, and I want to talk about them briefly. So I'm not a big fan of Merc Riot Guard. His base stats are pretty trash. You don't really need the taunt, because Ravager Stitcher actually does this function really well on his basic, and they basically have defense up almost all the time on the Ravagers anyways. So this would give, you know, defense up to the other allies, but it's only for 1 turn, and so I don't think that's very good. Even though it's on a cooldown of 2, I think it's a bit of a wasted skill. You're not really doing any damage, and I'm not a big fan of this personally. His deflect thing also only works in war, so I don't like that. Merc Lieutenant, on the other hand, he has some of the work. I have to bring up the stat chart again. So he's here, over here. So he has some of the lowest hit points of all the minions, and I really don't like his overall stats. I'm afraid that any AoE would knock him over like a stack of cards, because I don't think that he'll survive. I'm concerned that the Hela All would kill him, even though they have reduced damage because their stats are so low. But the ability is really good, right? Offense up and speed up basically to everyone, and that's respectable. The Ravagers don't really need the offense up portion because they have on spawn 2 turns of offense up. So this would impact your other characters, I guess, or when you need to down the line after that, if they're not dead after 2 or 3 turns. There is the speed up as well, of course. It's the stats. I think it's the stat part. A lot of this outside of war for the Mercs, they don't trigger, or they're hard to trigger, or the 30% chance, 40% chance with the T4 to heal. His max health is so bad that I just don't think it's going to translate into much healing. And so there is the basic, of course, that gives ability energy to 1 random ally, but otherwise they have to be Mercs. Specifically Merc villains, of course, in order to get the other stuff. I think all Mercs are villains, so I don't know why it says that. But otherwise, I'm just not a big fan. But if you want to go for Mercs, that's completely okay. If you have like 7 red star Merc characters, go for it. But I only have 4 star. So actually I have 5 star Merc Lieutenant, but my Riot Guard's only 4, so it's kind of a no-go for me. As far as the shield characters go, I think that the base stats are far too low. I understand that a lot of people are kind of leaning on this sort of crit chance on the crit, reduced speed bar by 25%, and because the Scourge that I mentioned earlier on does talk about that, but I think that their base stats are so low that I just don't see this being great. It might be viable, but I don't think it's going to be great. That being said, you know, if you do want to go the shield way, I think that's probably your second best option. So if you don't want to do Ravagers, if you don't want to do the hand characters that I mentioned, then I think shield is probably your best second bet, or perhaps combining Mercs and shield. I'm not going to say that that's going to work for you necessarily without trying it, but I'm just kind of telling you what I'm doing. So hopefully that you guys have a better idea of what to expect as the days go on. I'm putting my 1 million or so gold a day into my top 5 characters there. And then, of course, I do have my shield characters up a little bit. So if I need to use them for a burner or an alternative, I'll have them there available for me, just because I had them as a veteran account player. Otherwise, 1 million plus a gold a day. I'm going to get them to 75 G14. I'm going to leave it at that, and we're going to see when the actual event goes live, and then see how far I'm able to get. And then, of course, there'll be videos on that as the days go on. So that's it, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, stay safe and healthy. And I'll see you all later. Boilon signing out.